I went to Santa Clara, New Mexico, to watch my Zuni friend perform the deer dance with a group. The Zuni Pueblo dancers are known for their brightly colored clothing and beautiful dancing. One of their dances is called the deer dance. I actually live about an hour away from here, which is why he invited me since I was not that far. As I was there, I saw the dancers wearing bells on their ankles, and they used sticks with bells to stomp the ground. It was beautiful, as these dancers, the singing, and the rhythm had a distinctive sound to them. After the quote-unquote show, which I ended up finding out was an actual ceremony, my friend drove me back to his place. He lives pretty close to the river, and it's actually like the last line of houses before you go to the forest. So we stayed in his car a while, just talking about life in general. Anyways, my friend said that he needed to go inside and change, and then he would drop me off at my house. So we got out of the car, and he went inside. And as I'm standing outside waiting for him, I started to hear bells, similar to the ones from the ceremony. So I looked around but couldn't really see anything. Then I realized it was the same sound and pattern that the dancers' bells were making. I knew there should be nobody dancing this late, for it was around 10 p.m., so I thought it was weird. I started looking around to see where these sounds were coming from. They sounded pretty distant, but I still looked around to see if I could spot it. As I was looking down the block from where the porch light couldn't reach, there was a stop sign, and right next to the stop sign was where the sound of the bells was coming from. I see a silhouette of a person dancing. It looked to be wearing similar deer dancer attire, similar to the clothing that my friend and some of the people I saw earlier, except that this looked strange. My friend had given me some background on all of this, and he told me that they wear leathers and skins, but this one looked like it was wearing something different. Something was off about it, so I stood there watching it. I almost felt like I was in a trance with its dancing. Then I realized that this person was almost as tall as the stop sign, so I focused more on it, and I realized that it was dancing like it wanted me to see it. Then I noticed that it started to move slowly towards me, at very slow steps, almost dancing from one side to the other. But as it was getting closer, I started to distinguish it more. It had huge horns. The torso was like a barrel. The arms were long and lanky, similar to its legs. This is when fear starts to build up inside of me, and I try to move, but I almost feel like I'm stuck, just staring at this thing. That's when my friend comes out of the house and is asking me what that noise is. Me being stuck just staring at it, I couldn't say anything. Then he sees it and starts screaming at it in some language I had never heard. He tells me to get inside the house quickly. I go inside the house and I see him follow right behind me. Then he comes inside, and I'm asking him what the hell that was. And he just looks at me and says that it was Adegashi. He calls his mom in his native language. She comes from her room and looks at me with concern, and then makes a phone call. Moments later, my friend told me, a medicine man is on his way over here, and he's gonna perform a smudging ceremony. It's a cleansing. We need to purify the space and have him bless both of us. His mom then lights something in the living room and closes all the blinds and windows and locks the doors. After about 15 minutes, a knock is at the door, and it's this old man who has a bunch of bags and is wearing old traditional native clothing. My friend's mom quickly locks the door and has both of us sit down on the floor together. Without saying a word, the medicine man starts to light something and goes around shouting some words, almost like he was singing. I'm not exactly sure what is going on, but this only lasted like 5 minutes. He then tells us to get up and gets close to me and says, "They have took notice of you. Leave this place quickly." My friend then quickly gathers everything, and he tells me that he's gonna go drop me off right now. Yeah, in the middle of the fucking night, back home. As we're on our way back to my place, my friend explains everything. He says that Aldagashi is a term for a witch, and that this witch was trying to cause harm and was actually pretty close to doing so. Something about that these witches communicate with Chendis, and that they took notice of me and were now gonna pursue me unless I left town. He said that when the elders in town say something, we must listen, for they know what is best for us. He said he would keep me updated, but to not come back into town, no matter how much time has gone by. In the summer of 2015, I was going on a fishing trip with my dad and 3 friends, Peter, Andrew, and Jason. We live in North Indiana, so we ended up going to Lake Patoka Marina. My dad invites his friend that he always gets drunk with, and I think, well, it'll be a good time for all of us to chill in the woods or something. So us younglings agree that once we get there, we're gonna leave and explore the woods a little bit. We get there a little bit later in the day, around 5 o'clock. Dad decides not to fish until the next morning, and so he decides to get drunk with his friend in a cabin that they rented for all of us for the night. This is the perfect time for us to leave. My dad doesn't mind that we take his truck. He just says to come back before midnight. My dad wouldn't let me leave like this, but he's getting drunk with his friends, so it's whatever. We drive around some random roads, and eventually, we get to road 231. We then continue down this road until we notice that it stops. It stops, but there's woods all around. This is where we decide to get off. Now, I do want to point out that it was sunset by this point. So we walk into the woods, ignoring that anything paranormal or any crackhead hillbillies will try to do anything to us. We walk for about 30 minutes. It's definitely dark now, especially this deep in the woods. We had 2 flashlights and our phone lights, but it was still pretty dark even with that. We then come to this weird looking cut down tree, and my friends decide that they wanted to smoke a blunt, but I didn't want to. And before they even rolled it, we start to hear some knocking on the trees nearby, and we wait to see if it happens again, but it doesn't. So we just shake it off, like Taylor Swift. Just kidding. We shake it off and just kind of pretend that it was just some random wood sounds. Peter eventually rolls a really terrible blunt, and he and Jason smoke it together. We continue walking and decide that we'll turn back once we reach Lake Patoka. We keep walking until we hear the knocking again. We're a little scared now because we believe that it could be somebody following us. Jason then yells for whoever it is to come out. Everybody tells him to shut the fuck up because we don't want to screw around with anybody, especially when our only defense is Andrew's crappy handgun. So we keep walking, and now we're definitely aware that these knocking on the trees are not just random noises now, as they start to get louder. Jason just keeps looking back and saying random stuff every time there's a knock. He would say, "Bet you won't come out and face us," stuff like that. We stop after we hear something in the bushes next to us, and we start to hear branches breaking as well. We stand there for about 5 minutes, waiting for something awful to happen. Eventually, we decide that it could have been a raccoon, maybe a small animal, so we keep walking slowly. Then, all of a sudden, we start to hear footsteps, almost like there's a big dog walking around us. At this point, all of us are terrified. We start to speed walk now, as we don't want to run in case whatever it is comes out of nowhere and just jumps at us. We finally start to think like normal humans, and we decide to stop, and we all agree to go back instead. Peter starts to freak out, saying that he doesn't want to go back, especially not with that thing back there. I convince him that it's a better shot than staying in the woods with whatever it might be. As soon as we start to head back, that's when we hear it. A laughing sound. Laughing. But it wasn't a normal laughing sound. It was this weird hyena laughing sound. As soon as we hear this, we convince ourselves that it's just someone screwing around with us. Andrew takes his gun out, and he walks with it in front of him, and the laughing sound just continues. I kid you not, the laughing has been going on for like 30 seconds straight. It continues, and Jason gets mad and grabs a branch and throws it to where the laughing is coming from. Then, that's when I realize that there's no more sounds. Literally, no noise in the woods. Nothing. No crickets, birds, anything. Jason then screams out, "Leave us alone, you dick. This isn't funny anymore." 10 seconds later, we hear this screech. I'm not joking. It sounded almost like a lion mixed with an elephant. But it was a high-pitched sound, and it was just really loud. I know that's a poor description, but just picture the most horrible screech you ever heard. That's when we just fucking run for it, and as we're running, they begin to leave me behind because my cardio is terrible, and I'm kinda chunky. I yell at them to wait, but they're all scared, so they just keep going. I know the adrenaline is carrying them, and they're hauling ass. Well, so much for my gun protection. They eventually leave me behind, but what they didn't know was that I had the key to the truck. I stop for a minute to catch my breath. That's when I hear something running behind me. It still sounds like a big fucking dog, but for some reason I couldn't move. It's almost like if I was just standing there, ready to accept that whatever it was going to kill me. I just stare, and that's when I see this weird human-like person running on all fours, straight at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. This thing was so fucking fast. That's when I got shoved. I turn around, and it's Andrew. He sees this thing coming as well, and he has a look of fear on his face, and he pulls me to run. We run for like 5 minutes, and I have no idea how this thing didn't catch up to us. And I also don't know how my fat ass did it, but I did. We just jogged and came across Jason and Peter. We're all together now, and we didn't hear the thing behind us anymore. But we were still not taking any chances. We speed walk and then just jog back. We hear the hyena laughing sound again. We start to run, but the damn woods just never seemed to end. Even though we didn't think that we were that deep in the woods, the hyena sounds turn into just a scream. Then we hear the screech again at the tail end, but this time we basically break it because we hear the screech twice and the laughing sound at the same time. That's when I realized that this thing can make those noises, or there's more than one out there. We eventually get to a tree that was broken down, and we turned around. We saw these yellow eyes behind us, like a raccoon or a cat's when the light reflects it, except that we didn't even have our flashlights towards it. It was just looking at us. That's when I flashed the light at it, and we finally see how these things look. It was basically like a human, but really fucking skinny. The skin seemed to be stained a brown color and slimy looking, almost like it was wet. It had a small amount of hair on its head and on its back and around its neck. Its arms seemed longer than its legs. That must be how it runs on all fours. Once again, we just turn around and fucking run. Finally reach my truck. We get in, and I spend like 2 minutes just looking for the keys. It wasn't actually that long, but it felt like it. I freak out because I thought that I dropped them in the woods, but I found them in my back pocket. We get in. Once the lights turn on, and the thing was there standing, it was on its hind legs, just standing there. The arms were just hanging down, with these long ass fingers. It stood there as if it was analyzing what the truck was, as if it was confused. Peter then tells me, screaming, begging me to run over it, but I don't want to take the chance for it to be under our vehicle. I put it in reverse, and I keep going like that until we get to the road. The thing just kept standing there. That's when we see another one come out. The second one seemed larger, like around 6 feet tall, and that one let out a screech. They start to run straight at us. I know I don't have time to turn this truck around before they get to us, and I push my foot down as far as it goes. I know I was going way too fast in reverse, that I almost felt like I was gonna flip over somehow. But these things were now on the road. running on all fours. At this point, we're all screaming, scared for our lives. They eventually stop after about 30 seconds, as it's obvious they can't keep up. We still keep going in reverse for another few more minutes, and I finally turn the truck around. I then go about 90 until I get to Red Hills Road. As we're driving back, we start screaming at each other about what just happened. I end up telling my dad, and he just starts laughing. Okay, buddy, sure, we can go back tomorrow. Maybe they'll still be there, right? He didn't believe us at all, but he was also a little drunk. We stayed up all night just talking about it. We were going to call the police, call someone, but then we realized that they're gonna get mad at us for going into the woods. Plus, who's going to believe 4 stupid-ass college students, with 2 of them who had just finished smoking? We actually do talk about it all the time. We always tell people, but nobody believes us or seems to care. After that day, we never want to go back into those woods again, or any woods for that matter. Nothing else happened after that, except that I had this nightmare not too long ago. I had woken up in my room, and in the corner, I saw the creature that we saw in the woods, and it was just doing that hyena laugh. And to my surprise, it started to speak to me, and it was saying, "I'm going to get you." And it just kept repeating that over and over again. I want to say it was a nightmare or some sleep paralysis episode, but I just wanted to include that last part to see what you all think. You might not believe me, but if I can just give you some advice, don't go into any woods. My story took place several years ago when we lived on the Rez in Arizona. My entire family had gotten together for my mom's birthday at my grandmother's house, out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so my cousins were my siblings, and I decided to spend the night with them at my grandmother's house. Her dog started barking like crazy. I was half asleep in the living room with my 2 cousins on the floor, as by this time we were tired from playing and being out all day. No one was getting up to check, but I don't blame them because it was pitch black outside. But I could tell that the dogs were running back and forth, chasing something. I got curious, so I turned the outside light on and stepped out the front door to see what was going on. Suddenly, something jumped from the tree onto the side of my grandmother's house, and it started crawling all around the house. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a small man crawling around like a lizard. This thing was fast too, and the dogs were just going crazy. I ran into the house screaming and terrified that there was some sort of creature outside. The noises were horrible, and it sounded like there was more than one. I also heard some squeaking sounds that got real loud. My uncle came to the living room and woke everyone up and gathered all of us in one room. He put some big wall-like panels on the windows and told us under no circumstances. As me and my cousins gathered together, that's when we heard them, and they could be heard walking around. I looked at my cousins, and one of them said that our grandma always told them that when these things happen, to repeat the following words: "You who walk in shadows, you who are full of deceit, in the sacred place, you will find no seat. Great spirits of the land, hear my plea. Guardians of the old ways, come to me. In the presence of this evil, I stand strong, and with the wisdom of the elders, I belong." I don't remember how long the sounds outside lasted, but they eventually faded, and I knocked out. When the morning came, we all went outside to check out the house. The dogs were in the tool shed and too tired to move. My uncle got a ladder and we climbed to the roof. What we saw was really shocking. There was some sort of bundle, as this is what my uncle called it, My uncle told me not to mention it to anyone in the family, especially my grandmother. She had said all her life that skinwalkers were after her. I didn't believe her, but after that night, I began to wonder if she was telling the truth. I later asked my uncle what he thought it was, and he said it was definitely a witch that had cursed our family in the old days, before the treaties. He said someone in the family was a known witch, and when they were killed, the elders had placed a curse on the family. My uncle then started laughing and said that no one outside of the family remembers any of that, and that's most likely a rumor anyway. Well, this scared me enough that I believe that there may be something to that story. But after that incident, I never did spend another night at my grandmother's place again. We never spoken about this event, not even among ourselves after it happened. It was my friend Ben, Ryan, and me going camping into the woods, like we used to do when we got a weekend off, or at least used to before this. In general, we try to go to new places. There was this one forest situated about 2 hours away from our city that we had been told about. We had been putting it off for a while because it was said to be dangerous, packed with wild animals that could attack campers pretty often. Ben, in his usual part of trying to be a badass, said that he would take his shotgun and that we would be safe. Ryan was a bit of a wimp, but he agreed. So we drove there as soon as we had a free weekend. We got there by mid-afternoon or so, after we set up our camp and the night was beginning to set in. We decided to go for a walk. I mean, you know how we as men are. We like to venture out, almost hoping we encounter something, but yet at the same time hoping we don't. Hopefully that makes sense. So we secured our stuff, and Ben took his shotgun in case any animals approached us, and we started following a small path that got deeper into the woods. Walks in the dark like this used to always relax me, but this time, I was starting to feel uneasy. Something felt weird, like a sense of danger. I mean, we are out here in the woods alone at night. After about half an hour of walking and just not finding anything of interest, we started to hear what sounded like strange noises. It sounded like footsteps of several big creatures closing in on us. But to this day, I swear I could also hear soft whispers beneath the noises. I was feeling like a corner animal. In total panic, Ryan says, "What the fuck are those noises?" And so he just starts running the path that we had came from, and I end up following right behind him. Ryan, of course, was the fastest, and Ben was behind us, and he starts screaming to keep running back to the campsite. Now, call me dumb, but I somehow lost sight of Ryan as we were running. I mean, he was running fast as fuck, and maybe in one of the trails he got way ahead. I couldn't even see his flashlight in the distance, but I kept on running. I didn't care where I was going. At some point as I was running, I came across an old cabin that looked like it had suffered a fire and was boarded up, and so I knew I had ran back towards a different path. I slowed down and noticed that the door seemed half open. Then I heard Ryan calling from inside. Terrified at first, I froze there. I was a little doubtful at first for some reason. I bolted into the cabin and closed the door. I lifted my flashlight to look around, and there was Ryan. I pointed the light to his eyes, but he didn't seem to react to it. In fact, he seemed pretty calm, which was actually strange for him, especially in the circumstance. And all he said was, "Let's stay here for now." In a neutral tone of voice, those things out there could be dangerous. Now, I was worried about Ben, but I remember that worst case scenario, he had his shotgun ready if anything attacked him. I took a deep breath and started looking around the room. There were a few chairs that were lying on the floor. In one corner of the room, there was a pile of sticks with a bunch of stones all around them. I then asked Ryan what the heck this place is, and he just looks at me, and all of a sudden, 2 loud bangs, Ben's shotgun had gone off twice. I stood there paralyzed, as every other sound in the forest also stopped. I glanced briefly at Ryan, and he was just staring at me, completely quiet. I was about to say something when something started banging on the door. Ryan quickly grabbed my shoulder and said, "Don't open the door. It could be one of those things." I started walking towards the door, but he insisted, "Don't do it. They're going to kill us." This was really weird, but I was afraid it could be Ben, who had just shot one of the wild animals and most likely saw us come inside the cabin to shelter. I grabbed onto the metal door handle, took a deep breath, and as Ryan was still talking behind me, I opened the door. A cold chill ran down my spine. Standing there in front of me was Ryan. It didn't sink in at first. He started saying, "I was waiting for you at the tree line and saw you come in here, so I came to hide with you instead. Did you also hear Ben's shotgun go off? I think we need to find them and just get the fuck out of here." I tried to mumble something, but at this point I didn't know what to do. I slowly turned around, pointing my flashlight all over the room. I was by myself. When the light reached the corner of the room, I realized that what I had been looking at earlier was a pile of bones, and around them, forming a circle, were a bunch of skulls. They looked like human skulls too, but I didn't stick around enough to really examine them. I told Ryan, "Let's get the fuck out of here right now," and we ran as fast as we could. We found Ben near the campsite, and when he saw us, he became pale and didn't say a word. We got in my truck and drove the hell away from there, leaving everything behind. On the way back, there was a long silence. I asked Ben what he was shooting at, and he said, "Some things came from the trees and they attacked me. They came up from behind, and I shot them down." "Ben, what were they?" And he said, "It was you guys. I thought I killed both of you back there." After that, nobody spoke a word for the rest of the trip. After we got home, Ben just stopped talking to us, and he moved away. This was strange. Ben was one of our best friends, and we just never saw him again. When I was 19, I joined the army. This was in Singapore, so I had to serve a total of 2 years. I went through basic training. Everything was fine. I found out I was selected to be a seniorly after that. So I went to school for about 2 months, which is in another army camp across the country. The building that we were staying in was a few decades old, but not too bad. It actually looked clean enough. Anyways, there were a lot of facilities, dorms for sleeping in, toilets, showers, and stuff like that. There was a small corner in the ground floor for people to smoke as well. The first few weeks were very uneventful. We slept in single beds, 6 in a row facing each other. But from the third week on, things began to happen. Small things, but it was hard to ignore them. I slept in a bed that was in the middle of the bunk, and I was facing the open windows. Our bunk was on the 4th floor, and there was a tree outside, so it never got super bright. So for some nights, I would lie down and go to sleep, but just before drifting off to sleep, I would feel my bed almost shake. It was just enough to wake me up, but there was nothing when I woke up, or there would be a random noise, a fracture sound, to wake me up. Imagine someone saying something unintelligible to you out of the blue. I just brushed it off as me being too tired, but as it continued to happen every other day, it was getting hard to ignore. Also, it meant that I was sleeping poorly. I would later find out that I wasn't the only one, but everyone had their own experience. People just didn't want to share such things at first. I'm gonna list some of the more major happenings. The first one, I woke up in the dark. I looked at my watch and it was around 1 a.m. I was about to go back to sleep, but then I heard 2 people talking. I was thinking it was my fellow bunkmates. I sat up to have a better look. There was some faint moonlight coming in from outside, so I could make out the different shapes. Everyone that I saw was clearly asleep in their beds. The muttering of the two voices went on. The more I tried to listen to what they were saying, the more I just couldn't understand it. They weren't speaking English or any other foreign language that I knew. It was a bunch of gibberish noises, but there were two distinct ones. Terrified, I just slid back down into my bed. The second thing happened on another night. I woke up again, but this time around 11:30. The room was quiet. Everyone was sleeping. Then I heard the sound of shuffling, the sound of flip-flops on bare concrete floor. It clearly originated from the room, but nobody was walking. The sound traveled from one end of the room to the other. It was exactly as somebody was pacing the room, but I couldn't see them. When it reached the end of the room, there would be a short pause. Then it would start coming back again in the other direction. Determined to know that it wasn't just me, I rolled down to the side and reached across to tug my friend, who was sleeping on his bed. He was annoyed and surprised to be woken up naturally, but I did whisper to him, "Do you hear those noises?" He didn't understand what I was talking about at first, but by the very faint light, I saw his eyes widen in the dark. He could hear it too. I then told him, "Who is that?" And he said, "I don't know. There doesn't seem to be anybody." After a while, he shook his head and put his finger up to his mouth, telling me to be quiet. He turned around and wrapped his blanket over him. It was clear that he didn't want to think too much about it. The other thing that happened was when my bed was shaking. Another small miscellaneous occurrence is that all these minor things continue every other day. The timing of them gradually increased over the next few weeks. One time, there was a loud sound that took everyone by surprise. We were chatting and laughing normally, and suddenly, it came and shut everyone up. It was the sound of metal panes slamming shut, but nothing was moving. The windows were fine. Another time, the door to the room started to rattle, as if somebody was trying to open it from the other side. Thinking it was our sergeants playing a prank on us, we opened the door, but we were just looking down an empty hall. We were only greeted by a tunnel of darkness. There would also be loud stomping sounds coming from above, even though the floor above us was totally locked off and empty at that time. There started to be gossip, of course. Bringing up the issue to our sergeants was either met with denial or deflection, but it was clear from their eyes we weren't the first batch of trainees to experience something, and I wasn't the only one affected in my bunk. A few guys had it worse. People started moving out to sleep in spare beds and other rooms, or even with other trainee batches, even though it wasn't allowed. I continued to stay, thinking that I could live with it, if only a few more weeks until I graduated. I woke up in the middle of the night. I wanted to reach out to check the time, but I couldn't move. I was sleeping on my side, and there was an empty space on my bed. I realized I was having sleep paralysis, so I didn't panic. I couldn't move, but I could see the room just fine. I could see everybody was sleeping. The windows were open. The leaves of the trees were moving. And so I told myself to just breathe and maybe I could wake up naturally. Over the next few minutes, I was able to regain my movements and actually wake up to check the time. And as I was doing this, sitting up in my bed, I see something at the corner of my eye. Something that shouldn't be there. Something moved in the far corner. I tried squinting at it, and I saw something tall, very skinny and black. It looked almost exactly like a stick figure that a kid would draw with a marker. It would almost be comical if it weren't so terrifying. And if you don't believe me, I would understand. It started to move across the room, striding slowly in a broken and stiff way, like a bad animation that was missing keyframes. It walked or limped across the room. My fear was starting to build up. I tried to comprehend what I was looking at. I wanted to say something, to do something, but I couldn't. Reaching my bed, it turned around to look at me. The face was round and didn't have any facial features, except for 2 dots, 4 eyes, and a long wide mouth that pulled up into a smile. It sat down in the empty space on my bed, and reached out with one of its arms. It had too many fingers. I couldn't even count them. They were dried, wrinkly fingers, and reached out and touched the soles of my bare feet. I could feel each finger. With a massive effort, I broke out of whatever spell this thing had me under. I started screaming, and I saw that this thing looked angry. And with all the commotion of people getting up and turning on the lights, I saw it laugh. And then, there was nothing. At this point I was sweating. I know what I saw, and I could still feel the physical sensation of it. I moved out to another bunk the next day. I had enough. My mental health was suffering. Out of the 12 of us that were there, I was the 5th guy to move. There was only 3 weeks left in our training, but I didn't want to sleep there anymore. I couldn't. This incident legit turned me from half a skeptic into, this creepy ass shit is way too much for me. I'm getting the fuck out of here. It can't be rationalized. I just don't want to be around some creepy ass shit again. It's very mentally draining on your body, especially to have physical training in the day, and then you can't even get a good night's sleep later on. I even started to doubt my judgment of reality. It's totally not fun at all, especially when you encounter such things like this in real life. When something like this happens, it happens out of absolutely nowhere, with no warning. It's not some horror movie or story where you know something is about to happen. I'm going to describe what I felt and what I saw. I've been looking for somewhere to share this, and hopefully someone can tell me what happened. I have never heard of skinwalkers, or that there's a community out there that actually know about these things. I wish I could say something cliche like, I was on Skinwalker Ranch, or my grandma is a Navajo, or some shit like that, but I can't. I actually never even heard of the Navajo natives, or skinwalkers, or anything, and I sure as hell didn't believe anything like that existed, nor did I even give a fuck about it. I'm 18 years old, and this happened this summer, June 9, 2018. I grew up in the suburbs near ATL, so I had a completely normal life until this happened. I was out of school, so me and my dad went up to Denver to visit my uncle and aunt and my cousin. I have no other cousins my age except for this one, so we were pretty close, and we kept in touch often. His name is Charlie, but we share the same last name, 'cause his dad is my dad's brother, so I won't use our last name. Charlie was pretty big on mountain biking, so he wanted to take me to some mountain biking trails in Apex Park. The trails are not far away from civilization at all, and we weren't even going to spend the night there. We went down a few trails, everything was fine, and we passed some people, so we knew we weren't alone. There was nothing sketchy going down. It was hard to keep up with him, but he slowed down for me and we had fun. It was around 6 p.m. and we were heading back to where we parked. Charlie was 21, so we drove ourselves. This is the part where everything goes to hell. We are riding back. Charlie is maybe 20 feet ahead of me. That's when the smell hit me. Oh God, the smell. It was disgusting. At first, I thought maybe we passed a dead animal or something. It was more metallic though, and it was very heavy in the air. Charlie stops but doesn't get off his bike. I slow down and stop next to him, and he looks at me with a disgusted face. Do you smell that? What the fuck is that? The smell started to get stronger. It was so strong that I felt like gagging. Looking back, I wish that I had felt something watching us, or at least any indication that something was not right, so that we could have left or found somebody. I guess Charlie had heard stories about these things, 'cause I saw his face change from disgust to absolute fucking terror. as the realization hit him. Oh fuck. In less than 1 second from him saying that, something went by so fast and tore him off that bike. I did not see it because I could barely process what the absolute fuck was going on. I was still on my bike staring at the place he was just on. Chills flooded my body so fast that my vision went black, even though my eyes were open. Then the adrenaline hit me, my brain pounding, but I had no thoughts. I didn't scream. Then I fucking looked up. It was right there, so fucking close to me. It looked down at me because it was a huge, maybe a couple of feet taller than me. I wish I could tell you I didn't get a good look, but it's always crystal clear in my memory. It was like a wolf but standing upright like a person. Its fur was matted and greasy and fucking disgusting, but that wasn't what I was looking at. It had Charlie's face, smiling at me. The closest thing I can describe my reaction to is when the people in Bird Box see the monsters. God, I'm crying writing this right now. The smile that he gave was pure evil, but indescribable. Its mouth was way too big, and it was smiling from ear to ear. Oh fuck, the eyes. They were pure black, but not glossy. At first, I couldn't even tell if he had eyes, but they were blacker than empty, if that even makes sense. It's very hard to describe this. It wasn't even taking a breath. It was just standing absolutely still. I could feel the strength radiating off of it, like a power not of this earth. There was no sign of Charlie anywhere. No screaming. Nothing. That's when I knew I was next. I knew it. I just fucking knew it. That I was gonna die. My eyes flooded, but it wasn't like I was crying. The pure fear and chills just made my tears run. Suddenly, it dashed away so quick. I felt and heard the air rush around me. I felt someone grab my shoulder. Hey kid, are you okay? It was a fit guy in his mid-40s and his wife. I hadn't even heard them approach. Keep in mind that from Charlie saying, "Do you smell that?" to this guy grabbing me on the shoulder was about a 10-second span. All the things I just described were the emotions that were flooding me in that time, not actual thoughts. Then it hit me. I couldn't speak. I was gasping for air, my head pounding, vision blurry. "Are you okay, kid?" I just cried, and I was trembling so hard the guy thought I was having a seizure. I don't remember leaving the trail. I just remember getting to the exit, then going to the hospital. Charlie is gone. After that, he went missing. But I know he's dead. They only found his bike, completely destroyed. They did send a search party after him, but no one believed me. They think he just got lost, or attacked by an animal. I went home. I've been diagnosed with PTSD now, and I'm having nightmares almost every night. My life has been completely destroyed by this, and I know nothing will ever be the same. I couldn't leave my house for a long time. The days after that I spent researching what that thing was, and the closest thing I guess would be a skinwalker. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one, and that people listening to this on YouTube can actually believe each other. Everyone thinks I'm fucking crazy, but I'm glad you, who are listening to this, believes what I'm saying. Have a good night, and try not to think too much about skinwalkers. I think I encountered a skinwalker. I have no evidence, but I promise you all, this story is very real. I always been a bit of a skeptic, ever since I was a kid. Scary stories don't faze me. Horror games don't frighten me, and whenever I hear something weird at night, I always assume it's something normal, an animal, or just the floorboards making noise. Despite this, something very strange happened to me the other day, and I'm really not sure what to make of it. I think it's the first time in years I actually got scared. I live in a forest area in the US. Me and my girlfriend live in a large cabin, and even though there are roads nearby, our nearest neighbors are at least a kilometer away. We also have 2 cats, one of which sleeps in the bedroom with us, while the other often goes out at night and does whatever cats do when they're out of sight. I like to stay up late at night and sleep late into the morning, where my girlfriend, on the other hand, is an early bird. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was watching crappy TV in the living room while my girlfriend slept in the bedroom. I was beginning to grow tired when I heard something outside, near the cat flap. Just to clarify, our cat flap uses a chip so only our cats can use it. I assumed it was just one of the cats coming into or leaving the house, and I ignored it. Then I heard the noise again. It sounded like something was hitting against the flat. It happened several times at random intervals until I lost my patience and decided to just go and open the door. Clearly, the cat was having trouble getting in, right? I never thought about it at the time, but this was weird because we feed our cats well, and they're very lean rather than chubby. I passed the bedroom and peered in as I walked past it to see if my girlfriend heard the noises, but she was fast asleep. But the cat that sleeps with us was staring at the window. I called her name, nothing. She kept staring. I shrugged it off and kept heading towards the kitchen. The back doors are through there, by the way. So I reached the back door and saw a dark shape through the flap. I was then expecting the cat to be out there. It took me a moment to open the door, and I saw the cat tense up as I opened the door. The door opened fully. I froze. It wasn't my cat. Whatever it was had started moving before I opened up, and I only caught a glimpse of a distorted figure, kind of like a tailless dog, bolting, and I mean absolutely pelting it. I freaked out and slammed the door shut. What the hell was it? I wasn't sure. My natural instincts kicked in, and I assumed it was just my other cat, and I had merely startled it. Perhaps the darkness had made it appear larger. Nevertheless, I was creeped out and decided to go to sleep. As I slipped into bed, I realized something horrifying. The second cat was asleep on the rug. It took a while to get to sleep that night. Everything seemed normal until a few hours later. I awoke to a strange feeling of dread. Something wasn't right. My girlfriend was fast asleep. I held my breath and heard something creaking by the door. It sounded too loud to be one of the cats. It sounded like if a person was walking about. I reached towards my bedside cabinet and flicked on the lamp. The room was illuminated, and I saw something standing just outside the open door, staring at me. The same twisted figure I had spotted outside earlier. It wasn't very tall, maybe a little over 5 feet, but it was its face that scared me the most. I only caught a glimpse of it, but what I saw will stay with me forever. It looked like a dog, but its face was elongated and almost human-like eyes. You know that weird, distorted, snarl noises that dogs pull when they're pissed off? It had that expression. I instantly started yelling profanities as I scrabbled backwards, trying to straighten up. The creature turned and sprinted down the hall. I heard it dash outside and go past the window behind us, just above the headboard. I managed to look out as my girlfriend started to panic as she woke up fully. We both caught a glimpse of whatever the hell this thing was. as it dashed off into the woods near our home, grabbing my trusty shotgun from beneath the bed, as well as a couple of rounds from the ammunition box that sits next to it. I ran out of the room in my underwear and rounded into the kitchen. The door was open. I had forgot to lock it when I saw the thing originally. I haven't seen it since, and we still live in the same cabin. But I have bought sturdy locks for all the main doors and windows in the house, and I always check the exit points at night. I also go to bed a bit earlier than I used to, so I'm asleep when the freaks of the night start to wake up. I have been reading, and I have came across a bunch of forums and articles, and the only thing I can compare it to, based on what I saw, is that it was a skinwalker. If you know anything about these things, please let me know. Also, one more thing. Please stop leaving your cats or dogs outside at night, or bring them back inside before it gets dark. If you don't, who knows? Maybe next time the dog or cat you bring back inside might actually be a skinwalker. Before I begin, I'm 16 years old and I'm a male. About 3 years ago, I was in Virginia visiting family over summer. We were right outside the DC area and staying in a 2-story house near the freeway. On the other side of the freeway was a forest. So my mom, her boyfriend Eric, and I were all staying with Eric's parents. We had brought some night vision binoculars and decided that tonight was the perfect time to use them. So after dinner, we gear up and head out. We pass under the freeway and head into the woods. When we get about 5 minutes into the forest, we set down our bag and take out our binoculars. My mom looks around with them for a while, seeing a few squirrels here and there. She gets tired of them and passes them to me. I look around for a while, being careful not to look at the freeway for fear of being blinded. I spot something behind a tree about 50 feet to our left. I concentrate on it, trying to figure out what it is. It looks like a pale, bald, anorexic man looking straight at us from behind the tree. I get a bit uneasy, but I'm hesitant to believe it's actually there. I ask Eric to take a look just in case. To my despair, he sees it too. He describes it much the same way I did. Now Eric, a former amateur boxer, and I train MMA almost every day, but neither of us wants to stick around with that thing. We start heading back to the house, crossing under the freeway. We take another look behind us as a car comes by. All three of us see glowing eyes lit up by headlights on the other side of the freeway. We say, "Fuck that," and head back to the house. When we get back, Eric's parents are asleep, and my mom and Eric go upstairs to the guest room. There's only one guest room, so I have the couch downstairs. I'm a little too excited after seeing the thing in the woods, so I end up staying up all night. Around 3 a.m., I'm watching TV and start hearing footsteps above me. I quickly remember our earlier encounter and panic a little. I try to calm down and tell myself it's just one of the dogs or maybe someone who couldn't sleep. I keep hearing the footsteps for a while until I hear a doorknob jiggle. I find it weird that they're trying to open a locked door, but try to ignore it. They stop, walk around for a few more minutes, and then it's quiet again. I stay up until the sun starts coming up and then pass out. My mom wakes me up and I remember the footsteps from the night before. I describe what happened and ask if one of them got up at any time. She says no, and I think it must have been one of the dogs. That is, until she tells me the room above me is the office. No one was in the office, and the door stays locked at night. My heart sinks as I piece it all together. I don't know if it was that thing for sure, but I think it was. I'd done a lot of research, trying to figure out what that thing was that night. I found two creatures that seemed to match it. I think it was either a skinwalker or a wendigo. Whichever one it was, I'm just thankful that door was locked. I know I wouldn't be able to fight that thing, no matter how tough I am. To start the story off, and to give a little insight about me, I'm an 18-year-old female who grew up in Michigan and have lived in the country for as long as I can remember. And just a heads up, this is a long story, so bear with me. Now, back to the story. On one hot summer weekend, me and a couple of friends, including my boyfriend, let's call him Tony, and my older brother, let's call him Brad, decided we were gonna go camping for the weekend since it was such a nice warm week. Tony's parents had owned a cabin surrounded by a huge wooded area with a personal lake and no neighbors for at least 4 miles. But being stupid teenagers, we didn't really think about that. All we were ready for was to party like any normal teen would. Well, after being there for 2 hours, our fun had started. Tony's friends had brought tons of alcohol and weed to last us the whole weekend, so we wouldn't be bored since we had no service and only movies to watch. After it got around 12 a.m. and was pitch black, we had a huge bonfire going. It was a total of 6 people, including me and Tony. As we talked and laughed about upcoming events in our lives, we were so distracted that we didn't notice that my brother had literally frozen his eyes onto one section of the woods. Mind you, we were all intoxicated and high at the time. Eventually, our talking ceased when Tony realized his friend and my brother had an emotionless expression. "Hey dude, you alright?" he asked Brad. Silence. Brad didn't reply or even make any movements that would indicate he heard him. After that, I started to get scared, as well as the other 2 girls there. It took a lot for my brother to act that way. Eventually, I was the first to catch on that he was excessively staring into a certain spot in the woods. I turned my head and followed his gaze the best I could. And when I finally caught on to what he was staring at, my heart dropped. There was, right fucking there, was, at first look, a dog. At least, that's what I thought. It was some person's dog that wandered off. But then, my brain kicked in, and I realized there wasn't neighbors for miles. So, how could there be a dog? My mind started to race while Tony still tried to get Brad to speak or even move. Then, in one motion, this thing stood up tall. And when I say tall, I mean fucking gigantic. It had to be at least 6 feet tall. Everyone now saw it. How could you not? The other 2 girls and the other boy with us were shocked as they finally grasped why my brother was as still as a stick. No one moved for what seemed like hours. Tony was the first to talk. "No tell," he mumbled. No one heard what he said but Brad, and I swear to you, when I say his eyes widened as big as pan saucers, that freaked me out immediately. "What did you say?" one of the girls asked. "It has fucking tail," he hissed at her. My heartbeat stopped. He was right. There was no tail on this thing. My clouded alcohol mind cleared up in a fraction of a second when I finally realized what this thing was. Now I understood why my brother was basically shitting his pants. This thing was a skinwalker. My instincts kicked in right then and there, but before I could nope the fuck out of there, the thing let out a terrible stench like rotting meat before screaming inhuman like. The sound was enough to scare the fuck out of everyone. My brother was the first up out of his chair and started shouting native words to the creature, while I told everyone to get the fuck inside. No one questioned me when they saw just how dead serious I was, especially Tony. He's never seen me so scared, so he knew it was a bad situation. We all hightailed into the cabin, with my brother behind us, still shouting native words at the creature, which seemed to keep it at bay, while it gave us enough time to get inside. He slammed and locked the door before turning all the lights off and grabbing a special ash from the kitchen counters and started throwing it at every window and door while chanting. Of course, he had everyone freaked out and basically in tears at that moment. After he was done, no one said a word for a long time, all of us still in shock. He grabbed our dad's pistol and had it posted by him for hours. Everyone was entirely shaken up to even question what happened. We must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to my brother packing all our stuff into the 2 cars early in the morning. I understood why. We had native family. We knew what we were dealing with, and we knew it would come back, and maybe not alone. Before we left, I did a blessing on the cabin and spoke a few calming words to the still very freaked out girls. We left as soon as everything was packed up. To this day, we still haven't explained exactly to our friends what happened that night. But they have also never bothered to ask us. This is 100% real. I'm from Abilene, Texas, just under 200 miles west of Dallas. I'm 25, and my older cousin I'm going to mention is 30. We have family in San Antonio that we visit every year in the summer. And when I say I mean my grandmother and her daughters, my mom being one of them, and the rest of her sisters, and all their kids, my dad and my sister, my wife and kid, etc. We have a pretty big family, so we make a vacation out of it. We enjoy the water parks and have barbecue and things of that sort. So basically, to not make this too long, some of us took off to San Antonio around lunchtime, one Friday, the weekend of our vacation. Now typically, it's about a 3.5 hour drive if I'm in no rush, and even 4-hour trip. Some of the family left around noon and made it by 4. But me and my cousin, his name is, well, we'll call him Steven. Me and Steven couldn't leave till we got off work Friday around 5:30 to 6. So we left around the same time, which was 7:30. We didn't plan that. He has his own family and I have mine. We also both had one kid at the time and are both still married. So we hit the road, and 1/3 of the way there, in Brady, Texas, we noticed each other at the gas station. What are the odds, right? So we were laughing, and he took off as I went inside and told him I wanted 20 on number 3. I always like to have more than enough fuel on road trips. So after I filled up and checked the baby and wife and make sure that everything is good, we get back on the road. The sun has faded away, and it's almost pitch black now. If anyone has driven 283 south, it turns into US 87 just after Mason, Texas, all the way to Fredericksburg, Texas. And basically, the only light for that 1.5 hour strip is your headlight, and that's where it happened. So we're cruising, and there's deer signs every 10 miles or so, because there's so many of them on that strip. So with my aftermarket headlights on my 2013 GMC Sierra, it's very well lit, so I feel comfortable knowing that I'm driving safe in case I see something run out from the side of the road. And just after Mason is when I saw it. So I'm driving south, and this thing is walking north in the direction towards me, on the same side of the road as well. So it was on the passenger side of the truck as we passed. It was walking all the way to the side of the road, but not quite on the grass either. My wife was on her phone as I said, "Did you see that?" She said, "See what?" Now keep this in mind. I just previously mentioned it's pitch black. I haven't seen a car on the side of the road, much less a house or ranch, for the last 10 minutes or so. So I can't really describe. What I saw was a human body with a sheet over it. It seemed to be human legs and feet, but I couldn't really tell because I was going 77 and it happened so fast. But it looked like human skin and flesh from the shins down, including toes. And I watched it as it took 3 or 4 strides. It didn't seem very large in size, maybe 5'9" or 6 feet at best. Not bony, not obese. Also, I didn't see arms. It was literally a whole white sheet looking fabric over its whole body. I mentioned the height because of the Skinwalker talk. But what freaked me out the most is how, or why, would some sick bastard pull a prank like this? If they did, where did they live? I'm talking about some Jeepers Creepers bus scene back road driving, that kind of empty. Another thing to mention is that the sheet didn't have holes cut out for the eyes, so how did it see in pitch black? And whatever this thing is, how did it know not to walk in the middle of the street? I had so many questions, but I didn't want to freak the wife out, so I just floored it. I started going around 105 and had to calm myself down because I kept looking in the rear view mirror looking for headlights on some Jeepers Creepers shit again. I don't know why I keep referencing that movie because I haven't seen it in like 5 years. But still, here's the best part. I got over it when we got to the family's house and showered and got all settled in. And that's when I went outside to go chill with the family and catch up. And that's when I overheard Steven telling them what happened on the drive over between Mason and Fredericksburg. And that's when every hair on my neck and arms stood up. And it just did again as I'm typing this. The picture is so vivid and the feeling is so real. I looked at Steven and I asked to describe what he saw. And he described exactly what I saw as well. We were so surprised. Again, could it have been some weirdo playing a game? A ghost? How cliche with the whole white sheet thing, right? Or a real serial killer waiting for someone to turn around? I don't know, but for damn sure, I wasn't gonna be the one to ask him if he needed help. So from this day on, I refused to ever drive to or from San Antonio, Texas after dark. Me and 4 of my buddies on a reserve. Day 1 about 8:30 in the morning, about 500 yards from my spot, my buddy filmed a fat black bear. We only had what you call muzzle loaders. They are like a Civil War style gun. You get one shot, then you gotta reload with the ramrod and stuff. I never saw any deer, so at 2 p.m. after lunch, me and another buddy scout for a new spot. We end up finding a hellacious animal trail and he drops me off. I tell him pick me up, I'll be on the road after dark. He's about 7 miles away. I sit there from 2 p.m. till dark and all I see are loads of elk. The trail wasn't deer, it was elk highway, so it does get dark. And I creep down to the road. Right at dusk, almost too dark to see something, crashes into the thick bushes about 30 yards in front of me across the road. I'm thinking that maybe it's a deer, so I call just to get a reaction, but nothing. So I creep on it, thinking I can bust it if it's a deer, but it doesn't move. He's just sniffing like a dog. Sniff, sniff, sniff. I kick the ground and stop trying to bump it, but the dog just keeps sniffing. I remember that bear, and I'm 10 feet from whatever this is. I slowly back into a feed plot behind me with my one shot at my hip. I'm gonna have to hip shoot it if it's a bear. I get 50 yards in the middle of a field plot, a big elk off to my right in the full moonlight. I see something drive out of the bushes into the thickest part in the road to my left. It's a standoff, eyes reflecting back. They look 8 inches apart, 4 foot off the ground. It's just sniffing over and over. It's full, dark, and this thing is stalking me using cover. My buddy lights start shining down the road, and this thing crashes through the bushes away. I figure it's a bear, but I don't know. I was a little bit scared, I'm not gonna lie. I had one shot in the dark. Coyotes howling like crazy too. And the predators were out in full effect on the full moonlight. One summer, when I was only 14 years old, I spent a couple of weeks at my grandparents' house on the Navajo Reservation in Arizona. It was close to the New Mexico state line, even though it was out in the middle of the hills. It was an awesome place. My little brother, he was 11. My grandmother was a great cook. She makes the best fried bread. And my grandfather tells great stories, the kind that you can't hear anywhere else. Now, thanks to that visit there, I have a story of my own. My grandparents have this old guy, a Navajo too, who does odd jobs around the house. His name is Paul. He carries around a silver flask. One evening, as soon as the sun is going down, my grandmother then tells me to take him home. My grandfather is the one who always does it, but he is out at a neighbor's ranch, helping with some cattle. I say sure, and it gives me the chance to drive my grandfather's old pickup truck, something that I have never been allowed to do back home. But there on the reservation, no one cares. There's a few people around. It's not like you're gonna hurt anyone. So my little brother jumps in with me, while Paul and my grandparents' dog climb into the bed. Paul lives in a small hogan, about 10 minutes deeper into the res. By the time we drop him off, the sun is already going down. Back on the road, there's no street lights of any kind. We are driving along when out of the corner of my eye, I notice some movement there in the scrub and low bushes off to the side. I slow down. There are all kinds of sheep around there. The people who own them, letting them roam about the place freely. I don't want to explain to my grandma why there is blood from a sheep in the front grill. As we drive past the spot where I saw the movement, there's nothing there. So I resume speed, bumping along the dirt road without a care in the world. Then out of nowhere, we get a strong whiff of something nasty, as if some animal has died, and its body is rotting where it fell. With it comes this sense of deep dread, for which I have no explanation. My little brother feels it too, and he doesn't say as much, but I can see it in his face. I then tell him that everything is good, and we keep on driving. Moments later, I look in the rear view mirror and see this dark silhouette of something very tall and very skinny, covered with some kind of hair or fur, running behind the truck after us. Whatever it is, it doesn't look human. My brother sees it too, and he starts crying. My grandparents' dog is in the back, barking. I'm wanting to make the truck go faster, but the dirt road is so uneven, and the pickup is bouncing and shaking all over the place as it is. I'm afraid if I go any faster, I'll crash it off to the road. My brother then starts to scream because it's coming up alongside the truck on my side. I remember being so scared that all I'm thinking is that this thing is going to get us. Then just as I'm ready to cry too, around the bend and coming at us is this car. Just like that, the feeling of dread and panic disappears. Whatever was chasing us is now gone. When we get back to my grandparents' place, we run into the house, checking at our backs to make sure we weren't followed. My grandmother, obviously seeing that we are upset, tells us, "What's the matter?" We can't get the story out fast enough. She tells us it was Yinadoshi, something the Navajo call a skinwalker. She explains that they are people who use black magic and bad medicine. I've been back there many times since then, but this is my only encounter with a skinwalker. It was a dark, clear night within a 45-minute drive from Big Sandy, Texas. A roommate, her boyfriend, and I went to find a place to have a couple of drinks and hang out. We drove for a while and were headed back to Big Sandy when the boyfriend said he had to take a leak. So of course, we told him to pull off to the side of the road. Not much later, he saw a sign for a cemetery, but I can't remember the name, or else I would tell you all. It was a very wooded area, and the cemetery was gated. However, the gates were open. The cemetery was up an incline and couldn't be seen from the road. My roommate and I were completely creeped out and kept telling him to turn back. He made the excuse of it was too tight to turn back and he promised us it would be okay. So we kept going. About 3 to 5 minutes later up the dirt road was a clearing with a few trees. In the moonlight and car lights, we could see a small mausoleum, gravestones, and more gravestones ahead of us in a very dark road. My roommate's boyfriend then jumped out to go take a leak behind a large man-sized headstone, and we were left in the car. I don't know why, but I decided to get out of the car for a second, but it was so quiet, and all these woods in East Texas are never quiet. I got a little bit creeped out of the whole situation, so I jumped back in. As we were both sitting in the car, waiting for her boyfriend to come back, my roommate then tells me, "Hey, do you see that in front of us?" Mind you, it's pretty dark, but I tell her where, and she points ahead of us, about 50 yards away. As I focus deep into the darkness, I see something, a dark shadow, pitch black, more darker than the surrounding area. But what stood out was, it looked like a shadow of a human, but it was weird. It was about 2 to 3 feet tall. We then saw it move. We screamed out the window for our friend to hurry. In the 5 seconds that it took us to scream, this thing, or creature, started running towards us. As it was getting closer, we were screaming more, and my roommate's boyfriend jumped back in the car. And before he peeled back out, we were going in reverse, and this thing was just standing there. We all saw it, and then it walked away. It disappeared back into the woods to our right. We never saw it on the way back out the cemetery again. Nobody said a single word on the way back. My friends refused to talk about it after, and no one believed me, but I know what I saw, and they know what they saw. However, I do wish I could remember the name of the cemetery so that you all could go as well. So this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter I was home for Christmas, taking care of the farm, As I was home by myself, late in the night, I hear all of our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs. There are plenty of those in the area. So I throw on some boots, grab a shotgun, load it up, and head out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time I see two dogs. But they were standing up, facing each other, and fighting. I think, perfect, 2 for 1. So I pump a shell into the chamber of Mr. 12 gauge. And then it happened. The two dogs heard the rack. They both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away on their back legs. I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with came to my mind. Also, keep in mind that I am a white guy, and up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories that the native kids like to tell to scare us. But that night, they became real to me. My uncle is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in South California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down and the dog then began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know, and it scared the shit out of him. A man from the reservation has just delivered a bull to a buyer's ranch out to the far reaches of the reservation, getting lost in a couple of hours. It is a large expanse of land, and what maps are available aren't always available. Anyways, it's late and getting dark by the time he gets home on the main road towards home. Just as he gets to the intersection where there's no stop sign, he sees up ahead, right in the middle of the road, a lone coyote. It's just standing there. So before he starts driving, he leans on the horn. In response, he watches as the coyote raises up on its back legs. It assumes the form of a man, only his legs and feet. Arms and hands seem more canine than human, and with a spastic gait, it starts walking towards the opposite shoulder. The man, not believing what he's seeing, closes his eyes and shakes his head. When again he looks, there's the coyote sitting off to the side of the road and looking back at him as if it's waiting on him to drive by. The man, certain that it's the lights playing tricks on him and the fact that it has been a long and draining drive. However, as he passes the coyote, he gives it a quick look and he sees that this coyote is grinning back at him. Having heard stories of skinwalkers, the man blesses himself and he fixes his eyes on the road ahead. Someone, please. I don't know what to do. I try to tell my wife about this, but she's a science teacher, and thanks to my history of practical jokes, she thinks I'm just kidding. There's something stalking me. I don't know what it wants, but almost every night, since I started seeing it, it has terrorized me. It doesn't touch me. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't communicate in any sort of way. It just fills me with horror. If what I'm about to say seems like I'm just rambling, please forgive me. I haven't slept in several days. We live in the second floor of a duplex, with stairs down to the back of the house, to the basement where the laundry machines are. There's a door at the bottom of the stairs, before the door to the basement, that looks out onto our back porch and into the backyard. 6 days ago, I was going down to the basement to bring up some laundry, and I glanced out the door as I passed, and there was a dark figure standing at the far edge of our yard. Her back was to me, and she was just standing there. She was looking into the woods beyond our yard. She was dressed in nothing but a light gown. It had lots of flowing material coming off of it that was whipping around in the air slowly. The whole scene creeped me out instantly, but I thought she might be a friend of our downstairs neighbor, so I just continued to the basement. And then when I came back up, she wasn't there. The next night I went down again, and as I passed the back door, I looked outside. The woman was back. She was exactly like she was the night before, facing away, not moving. The hair on my arms and neck stood up straight when I saw her. I was even more creeped out when I realized she was in the same clothes as the night before. That's when I did something I shouldn't have done. I opened the back door. Leaning out, I called to her to see if she was okay, but she didn't respond. She didn't even make some sort of indication that she heard me. It was freezing cold, so I shut the door and locked it. Coming back upstairs afterwards, I looked out the window and she was gone again. Later on that same night, I was in the bedroom getting ready to go to sleep. Everything was dark because my wife had gone to bed before me. Our bedroom looks out over the backyard, and my side of the bed faces the windows, so I have to go past them to get in. As I was doing so, I got that same deep dread feeling in my stomach that I had gotten the first time I saw the figure in the backyard. Something compelled me to hesitate by the windows. My hands were shaking as I pulled the curtain back a bit and looked through the shades into the backyard. It was a clear night, so the backyard wasn't shrouded in darkness. And there she was. The woman was standing in the middle of the backyard, no longer at the edge of the woods, and this time she was facing the house. Her head was tilted up, looking directly at the window I was peeking from. I jerked away instantly, afraid she had seen me. Her face was covered in shadow and hair, but I saw her chin and nose. A sharp nose and a thin chin. Gray. Her skin looks gray, I think. Her hair is black and long. I was so scared I jumped into bed and covered myself with the covers. The next day, I played outside in the snow with my 4-year-old daughter. She wanted me to pull her on her sled in the backyard, but just the thought of going back there made me scared again. So I talked to her into digging holes in the snow, but in the front yard. When the night arrived, things went from bad to worse. Somehow, I had managed to forget about the woman. Then, in the middle of the night, my daughter starts crying. Our bedroom is just across the hall from hers. I thought she might need to use the bathroom or was just having a bad dream. So I went into her room to see if she was okay. She was uncovered, curled into a ball on her mattress. I pulled her covers over her, and that's when she whispered to me, "Daddy, there's someone in my closet." Instantly, I got goosebumps. I turned my head slowly towards the closet door at the end of her bed. Normally, the closet is shut, but now, it was open. As I looked into the closet, there was a dark shadow. That's when I saw her. The woman was standing in my daughter's closet. Not even when it was clear that I saw her did she move or make a sound. She just stood there and looked at me through the cracked open door. My blood ran cold when I saw her. "Get up," I told my daughter. "Get in my arms, quickly, quickly." She scrambled up and hugged me tightly as I walked backwards out of the room, watching the closet the entire time. In my mind, I imagined her throwing the closet door open and running at us, arms outstretched. I just hugged my daughter and walked backward into my room. The woman never appeared in the doorway. I heard no movement from my daughter's room. I tucked her into my bed and stood there watching the doorway to her bedroom. I didn't go back in. I just stood there and watched and listened. When I finally got the courage to climb into bed, I didn't sleep. Sunday came, and I told my wife everything. I told her about the first time I saw this woman. I told her about calling out to her and seeing her from the window. I told her that she appeared in our daughter's closet. She told me it wasn't funny, that it was my fault for our daughter's bad dreams, and that I shouldn't encourage her to be afraid of her closet. Sunday night, my daughter called me to her room again. Call me a coward, whatever you want, but I couldn't go back into that room. I called out to her, quietly, to come get in our bed, but she cried and said she was scared. I wanted to go and get her, but I was scared too. I told her to pull her blankets up and cover herself. Just cover yourself, honey, and you'll be okay. I prayed that it was true. I lay there, looking over the sleeping form of my wife and out into the hallway at the closed door of my daughter's room, and just kept praying. She kept crying a few minutes longer, but then she went quiet, and I hoped that she was asleep. Monday arrived. I put toys in front of the door to her closet. By that time, there was no doubt in my mind that this was some sort of ghost, but I still put things in front of the closet anyway, even though I knew a pile of toys couldn't stop a ghost. Monday night arrived, and my daughter didn't cry, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, looking at the ceiling, tense. Then around 2 a.m., I heard her bedroom door creak open, and I knew something was wrong. She must be scared, I thought. So I called to her like before. Just come to me and you can sleep in our bed, sweetie. But she didn't come. So I peeked over to my wife, and the woman was standing there in the doorway to my daughter's room. Her arms hung at her sides. Her shoulders were slouched down. Her gown was dirty, like it hadn't been washed in years, and it was hanging off her like torn rags. I wasn't taking a single breath. I wasn't blinking. I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and I thought, this is it. I'm gonna die. But she didn't make a movement, never even made a sound. I whisper, please, go away. Leave me alone. Sorry. I couldn't look away. If I look away, she will get closer. I was sure of it. If I close my eyes, when I open them, I know she'll be standing over me, looking at me. At some point, she was gone. It's like I fell asleep with my eyes open, even though I don't remember her disappearing. Just that I was looking at the doorway, and she wasn't there anymore. Last night, I laid awake, waiting. I asked my wife to shut our bedroom door, because the nightlight in the hallway was keeping me awake. It was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. Like clockwork, I heard my daughter's bedroom door creak open. I held my breath. Then I heard the boards in the hallway creaking, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I heard our bedroom door open, and I knew she was standing there, in the doorway, not moving, just looking at me. But I didn't look. I couldn't. I did what I had told my daughter to do, and pulled the covers over my head. I'm a complete mess, a zombie at work. I don't even want to go home anymore. I think I'm starting to see the woman in other places. A glance while driving, and I think she's sitting in the passenger seat of the truck behind me, or standing in the street as I drive off. Just sitting here at my desk, someone passes by behind me, and I jump. I'm afraid that if I turn around, she'll be there, waiting for me to look at her. And what if I saw her face? But I don't want to see it. I don't even want to see her anymore. But I don't know what to do. The only hope I feel is that, for unrelated reasons, my wife has mentioned about moving, but our lease isn't up until May, and I don't know if I can hold out that long. Growing up in San Antonio, I was always fascinated by the local urban legends and ghost stories, even going as far as visiting a few of the haunted sites where some of the rumored specters lived. If you ever lived in South Texas, you know about many of them yourself. Here, I will post any experience and any account of my friends and acquaintances that have experienced any of these legends. I started elementary school in 1980 at Westward Terrace in San Antonio, Texas. All throughout my school days, I heard many local legends. Now, the way I heard it, back in the 50s, a young woman had been in a fire. My wife says she heard the donkey lady had lost 2 children in that fire, and her husband is actually the one who started the fire. She was left horribly disfigured. It was said that when her face healed, all the skin had something of a droopy, baggy appearance. Her fingers had all fused together, leaving dark stumps or hooves. Disfigured and totally insane, she stayed mostly in the areas of Bexar County and brought terror among anyone who approached her. As children, when we could stay out late on summer nights, we would all describe what we thought she looked like. We were absolutely positive she waited in the darkness for us to separate so she could pounce on a lone victim, ripping and chewing. You get the idea. Most of the donkey lady stories have faded into memory, but one was a little harder to shake. One of my best friends told me about a cousin who was with his father and brother on a weekend outing. They were going to camp and do a little fishing in a county park. The group pulled up to a weed-infested area off a dirt road and began to make camp. The 2 boys had the task of unloading the pickup truck, while the father found a suitable spot for the tent. While they were unloading the truck, one of the boys heard a rustling in the weeds just ahead of the truck. He told his brother, who in turn called out to their father to come back to the truck. The 3 of them watched the tall weeds beneath the oaks away from the road bend under the weight of what was apparently a large animal. Then they heard a strange, snorting sound and a high-pitched snarl. The father, not recognizing the sounds coming from this animal, decided they should find another spot to set up camp. The 3 of them quickly threw the tent, sleeping bags, and gear into the back of their truck. While packing up, the father watched out of the corner of his eye as the weeds shook nearby. Whatever or whoever this was moved away from the trees and began heading for the general area of the road. The father urgently whispered for the boys to get in the truck fast. All 3 of them were in the truck in a flash, and the father started the truck up. He put the truck into gear and was just pulling out in the road when something fast and large burst out of the weeds and ran at the front of the truck. Seconds later, something bounded up onto their hood and began shrieking at them through the glass. It was the ugliest thing any of them ever saw. They swore it looked like a donkey, but it was mostly human. It then screamed at them more as the truck continued to move away from the weeds and into the road. It used its deformed hands to punch at the windshield and broke it in many places. The father hit the brakes. This thing slid off the hood and onto the dirt road. Throwing the truck into reverse, the father floored the gas pedal and put some distance between them and the thing, backing into the weeds off the road. He then put the truck into first and stepped on it again. Whatever this thing was, it was coming up on them fast. They said it almost looked like a wild animal, with an incredible look of rage and hatred in its eyes. The truck sprayed dirt off from the road at the beast as they pulled out, slowing it down just enough for them to get away. The donkey lady had finally dropped back and headed into the weeds. After the story was told, my friend let it be known that he thought it was a nice story. But then he was taken outside and shown the truck. The windshield was almost knocked out, the hood was dented, and its paint was scuffed. and scrape. So if you ever visit San Antonio, aside from going to the Riverwalk and many attractions around, and the creepy haunted places, stay away from camping sites. You might just encounter the donkey lady. So we end up playing football, dicking around with me. There's the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there were 5 girls and 6 boys. We all were around 15 to 17. We ended up just digging the day away. So we head back to the camp and pulling out some stuff for a campfire. Even though the trailers had kitchens, Tanner says that his family's property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon. And one of the girls also wants to tag along. It's about 7 o'clock and it's starting to get pretty dark. They take flashlights and take the trail to Tan's property. The rest of us chill. We make s'mores, drink, and kiss on the girls. About 30 to 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. You could smell it over the smell of the fire we had started. It was a nasty copper smell like right after you had a nosebleed, and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dry blood, but it was that nasty metallic back of your throat smell kind of. We immediately think it's some kind of electrical malfunction, or someone left a hot plate on, or some shit like that. We search all the trailers, and nothing is on, and we can all smell it now. All of a sudden, we can hear people booking down the path towards us, and Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing, out of breath. And they don't even break stride, they all run into the trailer, right by where the fire is. So of course, we all get the fuck out of there, and into the trailers we go as well. They end up calming down. Even Rooster is crying his fucking eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is going lower and lower. So my cousins say, fuck it. And they're about to go outside to get the generator out of a shed between the trailers. But then Tanner goes, fuck no, lock the front door. Ain't nobody else going outside. He's been crying too, and his eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are dirty as shit. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said sure, he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles, just in case. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before. One of their pigs had come up, ripped up, and was half eaten. They assumed it was just some big cat or coyote, even though they usually don't fuck with live animals. He had gone upstairs and packed the stuff, and told his dad they would be okay without the rifle, because coyotes avoid people. So they started walking back to where we were camping at. So Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but she was just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods towards the camp when they started to hear shit in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what the fuck it was. The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and they all beamed their flashlights over there, and there was someone standing back in the woods. Rooster said they shouted at him and told him that he was scaring the fuck out of them and what a dick he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was actually facing away from them. So they keep walking. They say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and there's a dude standing in the forest, backwards, slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking, and Tan keeps going. I should have taken the fucking rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, a kind of low gibbering has started coming from both sides of the woods. And as they started booking it back to the trailer, The girl said she had flashed her flashlight out into the woods to the side of them and had seen something jerking itself through the woods. The gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light from our campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them onto the track. And that's when they just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out in the fucking woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or some shit trying to fuck with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goat man or some shit like that. We promptly tell him to shut the fuck up because we don't need any spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the fucking goat man and how we're in his woods and blah blah blah. At that time, I had never heard of this goat man or any of that. But then a couple years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had a native roommate and I ended up asking him about it. And to sum it up, it's basically a fucking man with the head of a goat, and he gets among groups of people to scare them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo, and it's bad mojo to even talk about it. And it's even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I don't know this back when I was 16. So my cousin starts saying, the goat man's going to get in and fucking get us. The girls are all terrified, and my cousins and I are all fucking trying to figure out if it's just some bullshit, or some hillbillies, or some animal. So all of a sudden, the smell just goes away. Like to this day, I haven't even experienced anything like it. Most of the time, smells fade away or just lessen. But in this case, it literally was there 1 second and then not the second after. So it's after an hour, making it around 9 or 10. We stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figured it was just some assholes trying to fuck with us. So we don't go back home because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or some crazy shit like that. Nothing else weird happens that night, and we stay another night, and for the main part of the night, nothing happens. At about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. As someone is finishing their scary story, which I don't remember what it's about, the smell comes back. This time, it's so fucking strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. I then say that we should get inside, and this doesn't feel right. In reality, we should have just fucking left. We all go back inside and we're standing around. My cousin just keeps going on about how it's the goat man, and my cousin Rooster keeps trying to shut him the fuck up, and all the while I'm just feeling that something is wrong, and I can't figure out what the fuck it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong, and we're terrified and all huddle in this camper. We end up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats. We have a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody a hot dog. I get mine, and after a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how I get 2 brats and everybody else only got 1. And I look at him like he's fucking stupid. I tell him that everybody only got 1 because there were only 12 brats. If he wants more, he should open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tan just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Lord, get it out." She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on the cousin standing up what the fuck is wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and then I feel my heart fucking sink. I run the fuck out of the cabin, and the girl runs out with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everybody books out of the cabin. One of my cousin's friends then asks what the fuck was wrong. I start counting all of us, and there's only 11 of us now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin, but being that everybody didn't really know each other well, nobody had really noticed the whole fucking time that there was an extra person. and then I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know how when you're just dicking around having a good time, that you don't sweat the smallest shit, and you don't always keep track of certain stuff? I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us, and that they had been there for at least a fucking day, eating with us. What makes it worse is, I could figure out which one, because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person / the goat man. The girl kept praying to Jesus, and we're all sitting outside. Eventually, we get big ass sticks and go back in the cabin, but there's nobody in there. We count again, and there's 11 people. We go back into the trailer and lock the door. We explain what the fuck happened, and the girl says that she also realized, and that when he was about to say something, the person sitting next to her had grabbed her leg hard and leaned over towards her and said something she couldn't understand. So we are pretty much scared as fuck as we huddle together, and I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up, and half the people are asleep and the other half are packing our shit up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up, and some people think that we're just fucking around and still want to stay there. I just want to get the fuck out of the woods, to be honest. The girl's name was Kiera, the one that the goat man had touched. Anyways, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she says that she just wants to go home and she doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split up. The 4 that want to go can go, but I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin, and it's my uncle's and I have to lock up. I'm super pissed off at this point because I feel like people aren't taking the shit seriously, and I definitely didn't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people, which is now 4 girls and 4 guys, to get the fuck out. Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle and says he's going to be back. So now there are just 7 of us left by 4 p.m. At around 5 p.m. he hasn't made it back yet, and we're getting extremely fucking nervous. And the only reason I stopped begging them to go back was because he went to go get a gun. It's about 5:30 p.m. or so when the one cousin that did stay says that the girl Kiera is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, if she was so fucking scared, why the hell would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time the coppery smell has been gone. Now I realize I can smell just a little bit of it. I say this to the rest of them and everybody. And these are the people that wanted to stay in the fucking woods after we had the goddamn goat man in our midst, is laughing at me and asking if I set this up to scare them. I'm looking at them like I'm not fucking bullshitting you all right now. I then demand to know why the fuck would I play like that. So one of the girls goes outside to get Kiera. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kiera starts heaving. I don't know how the fuck to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize there was not a fucking sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was like later in September, so it was still fairly hot at the time, but it was super chilly some days too, and you could usually hear some big ass geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chit-chatting. So I step out of the door and tell her to come back in the fucking trailer right fucking now. She backs up into the trailer and we lock the fucking door. We pull down all the shades except one and put a guy there in a chair to watch her. She stands there for another 20 minutes or so. The guy then turns to say that she's still there, and then there's a huge fucking bang at the door. We all jump the fuck up and scramble around the living room. The banging is super fucking loud. So now my cousin is holding one of the girls and the other 2 are kind of giggling, nervously laughing, and me and the other 2 guys are shitting bricks. Then we hear Tan. He's screaming, "Let me the fuck in, stop fucking playing." So we go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in with a rifle. There's nobody else outside. Evidently, he had walked up to the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he had seen a girl. Mind you, he said it was not Kiera standing there. When he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned towards him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing towards the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer he had realized that she was getting closer to him. She had started off by the fire, and without him even seeing her move, she had been turning inches closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way back to the cabin, thinking it would open, and when he got to the door, it was locked. He turned, and it was about half the distance to the door. He looks around the room and then gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there are only 7 of us in here, right?" I get that feeling where your stomach drops to your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer while we were out sorting out who was going where, and then when we all went outside to talk earlier in the day. It has just slipped right back in. We looked out the window and there is nobody out there, so we recount everyone, and then basically I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier, and everybody says 8. I then say, "Well, how many are here now?" They all do the count and then realize there are only now 7 people in the cabin. So Tan had brought back a couple of boxes of ammo and his rifle, and he had told his dad there was some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think his dad would believe him if he said it was the goat man. He said that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours, and that in the morning we can all go back to his place and his cousin will drive us home. Now, I'm really fucking terrified. But I at least feel better because we can be American and shoot the fuck out of whatever it is if it comes back. But then my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks that I'm trying to be funny and prank them, and that she's getting really scared and that I'm not funny. He keeps telling her I'm not that kind of person, and she says, "Well, how do we know the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it's really the goat man, how do we know that this is real? How do we know that this is the real Tanner and that the goat man just didn't kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun?" So we fucking get into a huge argument about this, where me and Tan are like, we could seriously be in danger because at the very least someone has been sneaking themselves into our fucking trailer without us knowing and mingling with us. And at worst, something bad is in the forest fucking with us. One of the girls starts crying and saying that she wants to go home right now. And we're trying to tell her that we shouldn't because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down and it's getting a little cloudy outside. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we really can't get a station out there with anything decent. So we turn it off at about the time that Tan's cousin shows up. He was like 19, I think. At this point, the sun is just barely over the horizon, and he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer, and we whisper to Tan, asking him if he's sure that's his cousin, and he says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp, then walks in. He kind of glances at all of us and looks a little confused. He says, "Where's your other little buddy at?" I figured she would meet up at the cabin. Is she a little slow or something? He also asked whether we had been cooking blood in the cabin because it smelled like blood and hot pans all the way up the trail. We all say at the same time, fucking no, but we ask him what the fuck he's talking about with the girl he saw. He had come down the same trail Tan had been using, and he had come up on one of your guy's buddies standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him, slack-jawed. He had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. Then she smiled at him, and he said he kept walking. She couldn't seem to keep up with him, and kept lagging a little behind him. He said he asked her if she was hurt or something, and if she needed any help, but she just continued to stare. Eventually, he had been walking and turned around a bend in the trail, but when he turned around and went back to see if she was okay, the trail was empty, so he assumed that she must have taken a shortcut through the woods to our trailer. We tell him the whole story of what's been going on. I half expected him to say we were full of shit, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. Tanner's cousin gets back to the girl. He says when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it had kinda weirded him the fuck out, so he tried to keep her in front of him, but no matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little bit behind, and that he smelled this nasty smell, and it got stronger as he got to the camp. Eventually it got really strong. She had said something really low that he didn't catch, and when he had turned around she had been right the fuck up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point he asked her if she was okay, and if she wasn't, he would carry her back the rest of the way, but instead, she stayed quiet and just kept staring. He said that's when he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder, but he must have misjudged the distance because she was off to the side where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point, we know the shit's real, unless Tan is playing a joke, which we can tell he's not because he's almost pissing his pants. So they load up their rifles, we eat some more, and we just kind of sit around until about 11. To this fucking day, every time I think about this, I really pray to God that it's not some huge prank that my cousins played on me and just never revealed, so I was shit for the rest of my life. At around 11, the stink of copper turns into an actual nasty, gross, blood-like smell, like cooking blood and hair. Tana and his cousin Reese get the fuck up instantly and grab the rifles. There's like a half knock, half claw at the door, and I shit you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like when you see those YouTube cats and YouTube dogs whose owners teach them how to, quote, talk. So after the half knocking and half clawing at the door, it says in this weird toned voice, "Let me the fuck in. Stop fucking playing." It made my fucking nuts creep up against my body, and one of the girls just starts crying and calling on Jesus. It was so fucking obviously not a person talking. It didn't have the right cadence, and that's some shit that I never realized until that moment. But all the people have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people have a certain kind of rhythm to talking. This shit didn't have any kind of cadence. One of those YouTube cats, that's what the fuck it sounded like outside the door. So now I'm in full on terror mode. We keep yelling outside, "Who is it? Stop fucking around, man," and just keep saying, "Let me the fuck in," for almost about 15 minutes. "Let me the fuck in. Let me the fuck in. Let me the fuck in." But if you can't imagine how this shit sounded, then you can't imagine how fucked up the whole situation was. So then the smell goes away for a while, and for the next hour or so, you can hear someone basically creeping around in the woods. Every couple of minutes, it comes back into the door and says something. Finally, when the smell fades away, it's around 2 in the morning. Reese says, "Man, fuck this," and opens the door and walks outside with his rifle. He fires a shot into the air and says something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away, go away." He fires 2 more times, but then, from the woods, right up against the river, across from the trailer, there comes this sound, like a slowly gibbering and hooting sound. Then it starts screaming, and it sounds almost like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Like, I seriously have never heard any shit like that. Reese fires into the tree line, and then starts backing into the house. We lock the door, and we can hear the shit keening and screaming. Reese says something had come out of the bushes, super low to the ground, and crawling towards the cabin. He had shot at it, but pretty much that was how the rest of the night went. It was literally screaming constantly for the next 2 hours, and we could hear shit moving out into the tree line, but it never came back up to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tan had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle. Nobody else heard or saw this, and he told me 2 days later, after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises finally stopped, and he had been almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us, and he had nodded off. Then he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be sleeping, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He basically didn't want to try to shoot at the fucking thing in the cabin and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill ourselves. So he just stayed awake all night pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. The story closes pretty weak because from my perspective nothing happened. We woke up and I noticed that Tan was a little jittery and that he was avoiding looking at all of us, but we ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin, and he would lock up and bring me my uncle's keys to just start walking and he would catch up, which I didn't really want to fucking do. When we got a little bit up the path and when he came running up, basically we just jogged back to his house. His cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. We were too stupid to lock a screenless window. The window was fucking up when he went in there. Now, as you can imagine, I'm guessing it must have been doing that all night, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up and then getting in among us. As a matter of fact, it walked with us all the goddamn way back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group and looked him dead in the eyes before walking back into the woods.